This is episode 18 of the Fitness Plus Technology podcast with the CEO of Nudge+Coach, Matt Gambill.
If you are catering to, let's just say, weight loss clients and you're in a small to medium-sized city, by the time you kind of peel back all the layers of the onion, your target audience is only so big, right? So what you can now do with these digital offerings, these digital models, is that a lot of businesses are really interested in this because now you're tapping into audiences that are outside driving distance. So you've not only just extended outside your four walls, but you're also dramatically increasing your target audience, which I think is what ultimately we're all trying to do. We're all trying to grow our business, we're trying to be more successful and help more people.
Welcome to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast for club owners, operators, and fitness professionals. I am your host, Josh Trent, and this is your number one trusted resource for the accelerating world of fitness technology. Each week, we bring you an expert interview with a global influencer at the crossroads of fitness and technology. You'll gain the insights, tools, and inspiration you need to stay connected to the pulse of what matters most for your fitness business in the age of exponential technologies. This podcast is brought to you by support from our outstanding sponsors. Brian O'Rourke and his family of companies, including Videre Ventures, Integris Advisors, Moon Mission Media, and many more. If you're looking for unmatched guidance, capital, insights, or a great speaker or facilitator, Brian and his partners are the go-to resource for your organization. To learn more, visit brianko'rourke.com. We'd also like to thank the Fitness Industry Technology Council, your nonprofit resource for reliable technology information, supported by forward-looking brands who are seeking to drive increased technology adoption in the fitness industry. Make a difference and join at fittechcouncil.org today. For episode 18, we're learning from the co-founder and CEO of Nudge+Coach, Matt Gambill, and discussing how mobile health technology in our fitness industry is being used to create a healthier and better world. With all the growth and spotlights from our previous episodes in technology leading up to IRSA in Los Angeles, this episode is focused on giving you, the club owner, operator, and trainer, the actionable information that will make a difference during the rest of this year and beyond. If you've been interested in understanding collaborative care, virtual coaching, and how mobile health technology is transforming our industry, you're going to enjoy this episode. Since you've been listening to the show, it's no shock that technology is changing our landscape faster than ever before. And so along with this change comes roadblocks and learning curves where we get to understand those core issues to transcend them and serve more people towards better health and wellness. Mac is a wealth of knowledge, and by the end of the show, you'll understand what he believes are the three core issues for using wearables in our industry, including data access, data intelligence, and seamless virtual coaching. So let's drop into this great conversation right here, right now with Matt Gambill. Mac is the co-founder and CEO of Nudge+Coach. As the CEO, Mac wears many hats, but his primary roles consist of business development, fundraising, and sales. In his time with Nudge, the company has been recognized as finalist in programs such as RVA Companies to Watch and the Chattanooga Technology Council's Early Innovator Award. Mac was recognized by CIT as being a Gap 50 finalist, which identified Virginia entrepreneurs most likely to build the next generation of tech companies in the state. Mac, welcome to the show.
Hey, Josh, how's it going? I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
We have been in contact over the past 2 years. It's been so fun to be involved with Nudge+Coach and to see the growth and the impact that both yourself and Phil, your co-founder, have made in the industry. But Mac, before we get in, let's talk about something fun that people don't know about you. I mean, there's information about Nudge online, and we know you just started a podcast, but tell us something unique that most of us might not know.
Yeah, most people don't realize that Phil and I both came from the soccer world. He and I both played college soccer, both played semi-pro in Chattanooga, which was a lot of fun. I think at this point, people look at me and I'm, now wearing glasses and don't look very athletic. So it's one of those things. I think working on a startup, takes a toll on you, but it's one of those things where we've, kind of always kind of been living it, a healthy lifestyle, and it's kind of where we came from. But, most people don't realize that when they meet us, is we're all kind of a bunch of old soccer guys.
Well, I had the unique pleasure of interviewing you in 2015 on the Wellness Force podcast. We'll make sure to link that in the show notes today. And on that show, we actually talked about the genesis for Nudge+Coach. You were working as a trainer. You saw this unique need that was in the industry, and it came from a personal story. Just paint the quick picture of that for us so we can understand why you formed Nudge+Coach, and we'll go into what Nudge+Coach is.
Looking back, this was probably around 2010, 2011 when I was working as a personal trainer. And at that day and age, I'm sure people remember the old Fitbit One. That was the small little device that would clip on your, in your belt or your waist loop. And what we were seeing more and more is that, people were starting to wear these devices, right? Family members, friends, clients would come into the facility. I don't think anyone really understood where the industry was going. It was kind of a novel concept. It was, hey, Mac, take a look at this. I walked 6,000 steps. I think we were starting to see, and maybe I think all of us were kind of hoping there'd be a way in which we could leverage this information, because I've talked about it with you before, Josh, and we talk about it with our partners all the time, the whole 99% the 99% problem where, I'm with clients 1% of the time. What the heck is really going on in between sessions?
Yeah.
And so, like I said, this was back 2010, 2011. That was kind of the first signs at which, hey, there could be an opportunity here where we can actually start seeing what is going on in that 99% time. And so kind of over the course of a couple of years, we started seeing more and more devices coming out, what I'd say kind of smarter technologies, not just steps, starting to see active minutes, really interesting data sets that were starting to become available. And kind of the pain point we started seeing from our end, though, was just simply, how does this get into the hands of the professional? How does the trainer get access to it? How can I use this in a meaningful way? And then it all kind of ties back into contextualized feedback from me, the professional. And so those were kind of the three core problems that we saw seeing initially back in 2010, 2011 with those just early pedometers, kind of that lack of interoperability, I should say, or just lack of access, being able to actually see and understand what was going on. So, that was kind of the course of about 4 years that we've kind of had to tackle hurdle by hurdle by hurdle. But now we're kind of in a really interesting time in the industry where it's becoming easier and easier for both professionals and facilities to start incorporating this information in really meaningful ways and using that to leverage these technologies as a kind of a catalyst to launch maybe digital offerings, digital memberships, really taking fitness to another kind of the next generation.
And we're going to dive into what some of the new tools are, what you guys are seeing on the front lines at Nudge+Coach, not just on the consumer side, but also on the back end, how these health professionals manage the data. Mac, there's so much information out there about wearables. And I think we live in a time now where there's more wearables than there's ever been, and they're growing more and more. At CES 2017, I think there's an entire floor dedicated to just wearable devices. But for club owners and operators, how do they make sense of this data? I mean, before we go into the tools, what is the meaning of all this data?
Yeah.
Steps and nutrition and things like this.
Well, I think sometimes I think our society is so so wrapped up in granular data sometimes. And I know we go through it on our end too, whether it's with marketing or sales or whatever it is. Everyone's harping on the data, but I think there's a lot of value that can actually be tapped into from these devices in a way that doesn't have to be so granular. So take, for instance, you're trying to manage, let's say, dozens or hundreds of people, and you're trying to just get a pulse of the population, understand those in which maybe who are listening to your advice, not listening to your advice. Just simply seeing information and kind of general trends can be enough to at least point you in the right direction. With that said, too, if you notice a person just happens to stop wearing a device or using their device, that can be a sign. So I think we're seeing a lot of professionals starting to look at this not only as a way in which to capture great data, but also as a way just to kind of get a general sense, hey, where do I need to spend my time? And so that's what I always tell people is they don't need to get too wrapped up in data. It certainly does unlock that, but it can be really used in a way that can help just point you in the right direction in the simplest sense.
So I feel like Nudge+Coach, really what it's representing, and it was the first one that I had seen back in 2014, at the end of 2014. Mm-hmm. I had mentioned on the show before the film Personal Gold, where before Olympic athletes were the only ones that had access to this high-powered technology to track their wellness and fitness. But now the price point is lowering. So we're seeing consumers actually ask when they go to health clubs and facilities to train with wearables. That's never happened before. So we're seeing this big trend towards people not only using wearables, but making them part of their everyday life and their health and wellness. On your side, you manage a lot of data for Nudge+Coach. What's something exciting right now that Nudge+Coach is doing that's on the front lines? And tell people a little bit more about Nudge+Coach.
At a high level, Nudge+Coach is really, in the simplest sense, kind of a digital coaching platform, allowing you to take advantage of the great apps and devices your clients using, point you in the right direction to see who needs your attention, and then help, like I said, really map out your touch points based on all that information. So the idea being, how can we help a professional really be better equipped to manage the clients of the 21st century is the way we say it. Because what we've seen is just that, there are, to your point, a lot of apps and devices out there, a lot of sources collecting information. And what I get excited about is this day and age, you don't have to expect someone to spend a lot of money on a device. Everyone, or I say almost everyone, has a smartphone. I even actually use a free app on my phone that keeps track of my steps. I'm really bad about remembering to charge devices and putting them back on my wrist. So, I think it can be the barrier to using these technologies has gotten to be so low that there's really no excuse. You can be capturing information and therefore having a better understanding of who you need to be spending time with across your client population. So that's what I get excited about. But looking ahead, what we're seeing is that there's going to be better data at our disposal based on the various programs you may be trying to run. You can get some more interesting data sets that may be more maybe better correlate to different programs you're running in terms of weight loss or in terms of, if we get deeper into kind of the wellness space, more of chronic disease management. So a lot of interesting new technologies coming out over the next few years that are really going to kind of be the catalyst for some of these new offerings and programs.
And when we look at the offerings and programs, we're talking about medium chain facilities, large gyms, and also private trainers. I mean, in 2015, for the majority of that year, I actually used your platform. I was one of the early adopters. And I got to tell you, it was something that I had been looking for a year prior. I had always been looking for a way as a personal trainer. How do I combine my clients' data to something that I could actually coach them on a 24/7 basis? And it just didn't exist, Mac. And what I'm seeing right now with Nudge+Coach is, I think you were first on scene, you and your co-founder, Phil, you saw the value of using wearable technology. So what is dramatically changing in the role of the coach and the trainer? Are trainers morphing into coaches? And what do you think that's going to look like for health clubs in the next 2 to 3 years?
It's funny you asked that, because I remember having conversations with you about this over the past couple of years, just kind of that dynamic and, the trainer, the client, and then are these technologies and this oversight into more holistic lifestyle management, is that's paving the way for more of a quote unquote coach. And I think I'd be interested to do research and see how that term has, Google search for the term coach has increased over the past couple of years, because we are hearing it everywhere. And we're seeing people who I would have traditionally branded as being a trainer even correcting me, saying, hey, Mac, I'm actually a coach at this point, or a digital coach. So I think we're seeing a lot of interesting shifts in the industry around that for sure. And to your point, I think it's individual professionals are heading this direction. We're seeing small, maybe mom and pop facilities, fitness franchises heading this direction. So I think what it opens the door to, and we've actually written some content around this, is you look at your target audience and your target market. If you are catering to, let's just say, weight loss clients, and you're in a small to medium sized city, by the time you kind of peel back all the layers of the onion, your target audience is only so big, right? So what you can now do with these digital offerings, these digital models, is that a lot of businesses are really interested in this, because now you're tapping into audiences that are outside driving distance. So you've not only just extended outside your four walls, but you're also dramatically increasing your target audience, which I think is what ultimately we're all trying to do. We're all trying to grow our business, we're trying to be more successful and help more people. So I think that's where it gets really interesting, is we're increasing the revenue opportunity for everyone across the industry with these devices. And with the revenue increase, we also talk about the service increase. I mean, I've read in Inc. magazine that the new way to be a billionaire is to help 1 billion people. Right. And so if you're using these devices and we can scale one trainer service to meet hundreds, maybe even thousands of people if they have a staff, that completely shifts the model. And it's something that the fitness industry has been starving for a long time. How are we going to get clubs, like you had said, to make more revenue, but also so they can serve more people, which is why we're all doing what we're doing. Rock Health just published a report. It was the year-over-year growth in these 6 categories of not just wearables, but digital health alike. And it was a 13%. So we're now at 4.5 billion increase compared to this same time last year. Follow the money, Mac. I mean, all the investments that are going on, not just that Rock Health is tracking, but what you're seeing on the front line. What are clubs spending money on when it comes to wearable devices and when it comes to software platforms like Nudge+Coach that can scale that service? What are you seeing right now? I think, just take a step back, and I didn't get a chance to really address this from your last question, but I think a lot of people are now focused on what is the next step for these wearables, right? So I think what we've seen is over the past 5 years, in my opinion, they started being very kind of novel and kind of a fun thing to have, but people have really been scratching their head on what is the real value of these devices. And because the novelty wears off, right? Once I found out, hey, I walk X number of steps each day and I'm generally a fairly healthy person, then what? There's really no long-term value. And so I think what we're all seeing across the industry, I've been waiting, I think our team's been kind of standing on soapboxes for the past year preaching this, but eventually, and we're seeing that these apps and devices are becoming really critical elements in both client and patient care models. So when you're looking at a fitness facility, most facilities now are trying to do something, whether it's using, a heart rate monitoring system, whether it's using digital coaching systems, whether it's, just looking at people's Fitbits on their wrists. But ultimately, everyone's starting to do something. And I think what we're seeing now, and this kind of ties into those trends you were mentioning, is now we're looking at how do we take these great devices out there and really tie them and package them in a way that better fit within client care models so that we can both, we talked about increasing revenue opportunity, but also just increasing the outcomes of these individuals. You have a client that comes to you and says, hey, Josh, I want to lose, X number of pounds, or I want to hit these kind of outcomes. If I'm paying you, I want to make sure you have the best tools at your disposal to help me be successful.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, I think that's what we're seeing is kind of the next step is how do we have these technologies that better tie in these apps and devices in a way that everyone can be successful?
And I think the challenge is that a club operator, a trainer, they're very busy with the day-to-day operations, right? They're serving their clients, they're running their facility, they're doing all these things. I think taking a breath can be kind of challenging sometimes. How do you paint that value up front to people? Like, why should club owners care?
For sure. I think, like I said, what we're seeing from our perspective is a lot of the facilities and owners we're talking to right now are already experiencing a pain point, whether it's, trying to figure out how to extend outside their four walls, or, they've reached capacity in their facility and they don't know what to do next, whether it's, open another facility, grow into another one, or what have you. That's where digital models can come in. I always tell the story of Steve, who we work with, Steve was managing 150 clients, was unable to manage anyone else. He was kind of pulling his hair out over this. He had actually been creating Fitbit accounts for all 150 clients, had a big Excel spreadsheet of all their usernames and passwords, and was logging into all those accounts. So what we're seeing is that some of these pain points are already being felt in this day and age. It's a little bit easier for us to have a really serious conversation when we go in and just say, hey, look, this is where you are right now. Let's try to win back some of your time, and let's try to make it easier for you to cater to some of these people in between sessions and maybe better understand and recognize when, hey, yeah, I haven't seen Jack in a while. Let's try to get him back in the facility. So I think there's a lot of ways in which, and kind of back to the data point you mentioned, it doesn't always have to be about the granular data. I think this can be used in a lot of interesting ways to increase the value of an offering, to bring people back into the facility. But ultimately, this data is allowing you to get a pulse of the population and both combat member churn as well as increase the revenue.
And one of the great things that we're doing with the Fitness Plus Technology podcast is we're trying to highlight what's actually happening to move the needle, not only just for the club, but also for the client and for the gym members. Mm-hmm. And so the app right now with Nudge+Coach, you can actually go and download that app on the Android store and on the iTunes store, correct?
Yep. So the Nudge app is the app your clients would be using for iOS and Android, totally free. Check it out. And the Nudge+Coach platform is what you would be using, whether it's in your facility or you personally just working at your house, whatever setting you're in. And that allows you to see the data that's being tracked by your clients, allows you to see it, understand it, and provide value. Because at the end of the day, kind of to the question you asked earlier, what we're seeing is kind of we're approaching a day and age when people realize it doesn't have to be me or the device. I think for a while, a lot of professionals were really kind of skittish about mobile health, saying, well, shoot, I don't know. Am I competing with the Fitbit? Am I not? Where do we stand here? What's this relationship? And so what we're seeing now is that there's this interesting marriage that's coming together, and the data we've seen in our system totally supports it. We looked at data in our system, Josh. I don't know if I've shared this with you, that we were looking at how basically general consumers using health tracking apps on the Nudge platform versus those who were using health tracking apps and a professional. Those working with a professional were about 3.5 times more likely to still be engaged in health tracking after 120 days. That same population lost 4.5 times more weight. So from our perspective, we look at this and say, oh my God, everyone who's using these devices needs to be working with a professional. So The thing is, I think more and more people want to be using these with their trainers or with their coaches. So I think we're trying to make that a little bit more apparent in the industry that, hey, look, it's no longer the time to be saying, is it me or the device? It's a little bit, hey, how do we bring the two together in this really natural marriage?
I'm so happy you mentioned that, because I think there's two different mindsets. There's a scarcity mindset where we got to keep what's ours and we got to wall things out, including data. And then there's the gratitude mindset, right? So with the gratitude mindset and the abundance mindset, there comes this point where trainers can actually use these devices to free up their own time. I'll tell you, one of the things that frustrated me so much, even that I cared passionately about the people I was working with all throughout my career, is that I would go home exhausted. And I think we're seeing these high attrition rates in the industry because trainers are just burning out. Many guests have talked about this before. So with this advent of new technology, I mean, these are the types of things, these apps, these devices, where trainers can work with clients from a remote and virtual basis. And this can give their trainers the time back. Are you seeing this too in what you do with Nudge+Coach?
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's why I got out of the industry and stopped training, was because I got to the point I felt like I was on that grind where it was, working just incredible hours. And it, to me, just because I was also working in the group class kind of setting as well, everything just got very monotonous for me because it was hard to see change. When you're working with an individual client, that's the most gratifying thing. You see a person go from point A to point B, and I was working more with athletes who were training towards, getting faster or increasing their performance or getting college scholarships or whatever it was. So for me, it was working with those individuals is incredible. But when you start getting into kind of that class setting as well and working with more and more people, it's really easy to overlook how much progress is being made, for those individuals' lifestyles. And I think for me and for a lot of the people in the industry, to your point, Josh, it's how do we win back our time? We then have the option. We can work with more clients if we want to or not. Maybe it's just to better appreciate and enjoy what we're already doing. So I think there's a couple different ways people can take it. But yeah, winning back your time is just, life's too short.
Absolutely. And, almost everyone has a phone. 91% of people in America use some type of a smartphone. I think that number is going to grow. Peter Diamandis talks about 3 billion new members coming online, new online www internet members coming online. So the people that are using these services, not only in the health club facility, but just in the world, are continuing to grow. So I think we're going to see technologies like Nudge+Coach and like the wearables that are coming out get a lot cheaper and get a lot more accessible to people that have never had them before. So when we look at this paradigm of digital health, fitness, digital health, and wellness, from your vantage point, what does it look like? Here we are in early 2017. We're looking at this beautiful landscape ahead. What are you seeing now for 2017, 2018? Do you have any predictions based on what you're seeing when you go to meet with clubs and what you're seeing in the industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, I think people have been kind of predicting this for a while, but we're starting to see this really interesting convergence of fitness and healthcare. And, you're seeing it more on the kind of private side of healthcare, whether it's kind of concierge medical groups, those kind of membership models. But what we're generally seeing now is something interesting where you may have, fitness professionals collaborating with healthcare professionals in a way in which you've created this new, environment around a consumer, around a client where, yes, I'm working with my lifestyle professional who is a trainer or health coach or nutritionist. That person may also be tied into the healthcare setting, though. So I think that's what we're seeing is this interesting dynamic where there's now, in platforms like us and platforms like others, starting to really pave the way for this idea of kind of collaborative care, where I can tie in a healthcare provider, a wellness provider, and myself, the consumer, and I'm getting a better healthcare experience across the board. So that's what's interesting to us. And we're starting to see it. It's still going to take, I'm not going to say this is going to be mainstream next year by any means, but starting to see this early signs of kind of collaboration between fitness and healthcare.
So this model where an hour of a trainer's time for an hour of payment, it's really going to be something that we're going to see drop. And I think that technologies like this, from what I've experienced, are definitely going to pave that way. So the kind of tools that can integrate with a SaaS product, whether it's a club or a private trainer, it seems like every week a new tool comes out. People can kind of get saturated from time to time. Are there a handful of tools that you think work really well when we look at virtual coaching? There's the wrist trackers, there's the heart rate trackers and integration. There's even things that you can wear on your wrist that'll calculate body mass index and body composition. Yeah. What are the things that you feel work really well with health and wellness professionals?
Yeah, and I think the first question you always have to ask yourself is really like, who is my, really asking yourself about your client or client population or member population, because what we see is that in some instances, what works well for one professional or facility may not work for the next one, right? So you may be catering to, I know we've worked with some partners who maybe cater to a higher end facility, and people are coming in with Apple Watches and the Fitbit Blaze and these really high end devices, and it's a really natural, seamless transition just to get them to download the Nudge app, connect their Fitbit, and then voila, the trainer now has access to the data and can provide feedback. Conversely, I think, we see some that are maybe working with clients that maybe are a little bit more price sensitive. And from there, what makes sense is just, hey, there's some really nice free apps in the App Store. Fitbit has a free step tracker, Withings does, Moves does. And so it can actually be really, really inexpensive. You're not getting all of the fancy data you may be with getting one of those nice wearables. But that's where, like I said, it can be as simple as you really want it to be. I think sometimes we build this up to be like, oh my God, it's so overwhelming. There's so much data, so many devices. There's some really basic ones that'll get you really far. Like I said, the Withings, the Moves, the Fitbit. And from there, you're unlocking compared to traditional training and traditional models, you've just taken a very, what I consider like 19th century model or 20th century model, and you're taking it into the 21st century, just tying in something, some kind of insight into what's going on in that 99% time, because that's really what you want. I mean, there's even tools now that are just focused on client touch points that don't even bring in health tracking data like we do. That's fine too. If you want to start with a simple approach, it's just around kind of better touch points. But so that's kind of it from more of the client management side. There's some really neat tools out there, even on the basic side of looking at kind of marketing. What we're seeing is a lot of people starting to kind of bolt together these solutions to create these whole workflows where you say, hey, look, I'm going to engage people. I'm going to capture leads on my website using, something like lead pages. And then what I'm going to do is nurture them using something like MailChimp. And then I'm going to tie digital coaching into my lead capture strategy and my conversion strategy, where maybe you create some kind of trial membership where you're working with people for the first month to try to convert them into full members. So that's where there can be some really interesting things, and it's easier and easier to tie these systems together. So something as simple as MailChimp for email automation or Infusionsoft, and then tying into a system like us for client management. There's a lot of interesting things you can do.
I know you work with Josh Cherry from Delta Life Fitness. He's on your website. We'll make sure to link this in the show notes. One of the things that's interesting about his club is that it's a female-focused club.
Yeah.
And in this club, he was looking for a way for his members and his participants to really be held more accountable. And I think that's what a great trainer does. I mean, people are in the industry. You either have a club or you train in a club because you want to get a client a result and you want members to keep coming back. Well, a great way to do that is by establishing community and really tight accountability. What was that like? What did he do for his members? Can you share with us?
Yeah, so one thing that's interesting, and you touched on too, so Delta Life is more of kind of a female-centric facility. And so it's like I said, it all comes down to knowing your client or member base. And I think the Delta Life team really, really does, and they've done a great job with it. But they, and this probably appeals more to the female demographic, but they really went with more of a social approach. So the idea of being, hey, can we create kind of social forums for our community, for each respective location? Can we kind of tie in the ability to use these apps and wearables into the social component? And that works really well for them. So that's where it's been really interesting to see not only their members, but also Josh sent us a note a few weeks ago where even some of their members that had canceled their memberships or had been members previously were starting to engage through the app and starting to kind of get back into the whole and into the picture. So I think that's where social can be really interesting. Conversely, though, like I said, it's knowing your member base. Some may be more, and I've seen some facilities that are maybe more really tech focused. There's some, I think we've called kind of smart facilities this day and age where you have very tech enabled equipment. I think those facilities normally cater more to and probably speak more to a male demographic. I know for us, one of the big issues talking about kind of hurdles getting started, one thing for us is I think came about Nudge+Coach with much more of kind of a male centered kind of data, more of a data focus. And we had some of our early partners, I'll never forget, I was on a call with one a year and a half ago at this point, this lady, and we're just getting feedback. And she was like, Mac, you all must be a team of guys because this is such a data centric platform. You need to get more into like the more like, how are you feeling? The more, more of the qualitative stuff.
Sure.
And so I think there is that dynamic, and it all comes down to, like I said, knowing your client base and knowing your membership. So social may work really well for one. Very intimate one-to-one coaching may work better for a certain one. And then it may just be more of a, I don't want to say a Lone Ranger approach, but more of something where it's more of just really about the data and kind of user driven.
So in this model that we're seeing shift, a trainer can be in a club with a client maybe once a month, twice a month, but then still stay in contact and build revenue for themselves or the club throughout the entire 30 days of that month. And I think that's what's most exciting because like we had talked about in the very beginning of the interview, trainers might be threatened by tech and even club owners. There's so much info out there. How does a club owner or trainer cut through the static and really focus on what matters? Are there a few technical pieces that they need to be paying attention to this year?
I think what we always kind of boil it down to is the idea like technology is great. And, as being the founder of a technology company, I think we build some really neat things. But at the end of the day, value is really provided by the professional. And as much as I want to say like our technology is going to change lives and, I think we're a part of it for sure. And I think we're all puzzle pieces though. And I think naturally what needs to occur is, the tech-enabled professional is the way I like to say it. So I think what we see is communication has to be a key aspect. Data's great, but data without contextualized feedback, I just don't think is effective. So I think that's where we've also seen a lot of consumer technologies fail, is that they provide kind of automated feedback, very generic feedback. I'm sure a lot of you listening probably have some device that says, hey, you've been sitting down for 20 minutes, stand up and walk around, and there's no context. It doesn't know you're in the middle of a big business meeting or a pitch or a podcast. Right. And you're like, I can't get up. So I think what we see is maybe even starting with just basic touch points of communication. And I even saw a facility, Josh, that, getting away from technology, I think corporate entity actually wanted all the franchise locations to actually have one touch point with every member once a month in between sessions. And it wasn't even a phone call or text. It was, hey, they were sending a postcard. Mm-hmm. So, I think at the end of the day, touch points have to be key. And then from there, I think what's interesting is you can start pulling in some information like, hey, Mr. Jones, you've only been here maybe 2 days this month. What's going on? But that's where I think once you've set up that foundation and that infrastructure for touch points and contextualized touch points, that's when the need for data comes in, where you start providing even more and more feedback.
This is so powerful because whether it's a club like a 24-Hour Fitness or an individual trainer or the tiers in the middle, these touch points you're talking about, really they're having the same face and the same brand give the same brand promise on a 24/7 basis, right? So this omni-channel, omnipresence experience that Brian O'Rourke has talked about, we've had a few other guests talk about this, seeing the same face of the trainer or the company or the brand that you're working with on your mobile device, in your email inbox, on an ad that you might be seeing driving around town, just seeing the same brand promise everywhere. How do you think a solution like Nudge+Coach can help deliver on that brand promise for a big club or an individual trainer?
This is funny. This kind of caters into the direction Nudge+Coach has really gone. But, we were at first very kind of skittish about doing anything that was kind of what I consider white labeling. So the idea of allowing, creating standalone apps or anything like that. And what just happened is that, based on this conversation we're having right now, is we had a lot of facilities and a lot of business owners say, well, Mac, this really needs to be an extension of my brand, and we really need it, rather than being the Nudge app in the App Store, it needs to be the, say Delta Life app in the App Store.
Yeah.
So, with that said, we started doing white labeling because I think to that point, we see a lot of professionals and a lot of businesses trying to extend beyond the four walls. And I think when you start doing that, we try to make it from our perspective as cost effective to do so and find solutions for those people who are just getting started. But for larger businesses, it really does make a difference there. I mean, it's wild, Josh, the conversations we have, the different ideas, business models that we're seeing come in are kind of spinning out of fitness right now around tech-enabled professionals like this. To your point, you may be only having one face-to-face or knee-to-knee interaction with a client a month. Maybe even, heaven forbid, maybe you never do. Maybe you're working with members that are in the next state. And so we're seeing a lot of businesses starting to look at this as saying, hey, look, we have a facility here. Let's just say Richmond. Just because we have a facility in Richmond, why can't we have a client in New York City or in San Diego? And I think that's what we're starting to see with this technology is the fitness industry is starting to dramatically expand beyond the traditional markets and traditional, models that we're used to from the past, decades. So it's been really, really interesting to see, and that's what we're starting to see more and more of in the industry.
To close out the show here, I really want to talk about what roadblocks you see. Because whether it's from a HIPAA compliance standpoint, maybe governmental regulations that are decades old that were made when mobile tech wasn't around that are blocking the growth of mobile tech and the growth of mobile health technology? Or is it that it takes a mile to turn a battleship? I mean, we look at these organizations like Lifetime or like 24-Hour Fitness, and for them to actually take in this mobile element and see an ROI for their bottom line, but also to impact the health quality of their members, which one is really blocking the path and the trajectory of apps like Nudge+Coach and mobile health growing? I mean, what's standing in the way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know I've had some great conversation with you and Brian O'Rourke about this, and I think it was Brian who even kind of coined it. He was kind of talking about the new user experience of the facility. It's no longer, for technology platforms, people maybe have heard the term user experience, which is really just kind of how the end user, how the software looks and feels and how they navigate the platform itself. But I think we're starting to see a renaissance and kind of a upheaval of the user experience within a facility, so to speak, where it's no longer just me kind of walking in a facility, checking in, going to aimlessly use some kind of equipment here and there and then walking out. I think what we're starting to see now is just something, people are reevaluating how a person interacts with their brand in their facility. And, we started to see it, I think early on when Facebook was really starting to come up. I think a lot of facilities were like, okay, I need to do something with Facebook, right? This is how I market, this is how I reach people. So that kind of changed the game with respect to marketing. And I think what we're now seeing is, okay, we've reevaluated how we're approaching getting people into the facility. I think now it's reevaluating that experience when we're in it. And there's some really neat technologies, whether it's with companies that have more tech-enabled gym equipment, which I think is absolutely incredible and wild, or we're starting to see kind of tech-enabled garments now. So I think we've all seen those videos from like Nike and Adidas that have almost like the wearables baked into the cloth. So I think that whole user experience is something we're very early on in this, and you started to see some new companies. I think you mentioned Fitwall, or I think Exercise Coach, Orange Theory, some really interesting companies that are reevaluating what it means to be in a fitness facility. I think that's just the first step. I think we're going to start seeing even more of that in 2017, which in my opinion is probably going to make it even easier to tie in more of these consumer technologies. It maybe becomes a little bit more seamless. But to your point too, I think it does come down to, I think HIPAA compliance is coming up more and more too. So data privacy, how are companies like us actually managing data or looking at data and user privacy? So it's coming up more and more, which is certainly a good thing. But as you know, data is generated. This conversation, data is being generated. We're recording it. My phone is sitting here. When I start moving, my steps are going to be recorded. So a lot of great data, and it's all about how can we safely and securely take it, I think normalize it, create meaning from it. And so, I think if to really answer your question, we'd probably be here for 3 hours, but I think there's a lot of interesting things tying into this.
Speed of implementation can sometimes be what separates people getting into a space at the right time or not. When you look at speed of implementation for wearables and for tech, do you feel like this is something that people need to sprint on, or do we still have time to take a breath and really research the environment?
Man, that is a great question for sure. And I think the industry is moving so incredibly quickly. Looking at kind of your last question, we weren't really introduced to real wearables till 2010, 2011 with Fitbit. I know pedometers have been around for a long time, but this is all really new for a lot of people. And so even consumers are still really trying to wrap their heads around it. So I don't think you need to sprint to anything. I think it's one of those things that's worth acknowledging that this is the direction the industry is moving. I think the next 15 months is going to be really critical for most people in the industry working with clients to at least not only kind of start setting the foundation for, what is your digital strategy moving forward? It's probably very similar, Josh, to when retail businesses needed to take their business online and start selling products online. Think about all the numbers you've seen from Black Friday this past year and billions of dollars being processed and spent on Black Friday. So I think that's kind of what we're looking at right now. Is 2017 is really going to be that year that you need to set the foundation for your business, your digital strategy, reevaluating your client management approach, and with respect to the user experience in the facility. So that's kind of my overview. Is I think 2017 is really going to be the year. I don't think you need to sprint to anything. Start slowly. Maybe it's with simple SMS systems. Maybe it's just enhancing your touch point strategies. Start slow. Don't think you need to, trip over your own two legs trying to sprint somewhere.
And if you're listening to this podcast, you're already 3 steps ahead, in my opinion. You can learn more about Mac at Nudge+Coach.com. There's also a podcast that Mac and his co-founder are launching. I believe it's already launched, right? There's 3 or 4 episodes up there. It's called Scale Well Podcast. They're diving into the wellness industry. They've had people on like Sean Greeley from NPE, James Maskell from the Functional Forum, and others. Mac, any parting guidance to a club operator, an owner, or a trainer that is looking at this dynamic space, this fast-moving space in technology? Anything that they need to know from your vantage point?
Yeah, I'd say don't be intimidated. Start slowly. I think there's a lot of great resources out there. I know we have a university at Nudge+Coach.com, totally free to join, that you can start learning a little bit about, the technologies, how to frame the conversations with clients on using these technologies with them. So, don't think it's something you have to be starting tomorrow, but it's worth putting a little time in, seeing what's out there, and maybe starting to see how these technologies could maybe influence your model over the next year.
Matt Gambill, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hey, you're the man. I always appreciate it. Thank you so much.
What we can now do with digital offerings and digital models that a lot of businesses are interested in is tapping into the audience that are outside driving distance from the club. With mobile health, clubs can not only extend their business reach outside the four walls, but also dramatically increase the target audience, which yields greater financial success while helping more people in their health and wellness. Mac believes that the data is showing collaborative care models are growing, with the convergence of fitness and healthcare both in the private side, with concierge medical groups and membership models, and also by fitness pros, collaborating with healthcare professionals to create new environments around the consumer and client. Mobile health technology in and out of the fitness industry is already changing lives and poised for growth. Mac believes that mobile health is a large piece of the puzzle, but what needs to occur to use this technology for a healthier world is the rise of tech-enabled fitness pros who use strategic communications with their clients. The data is great, but data without contextualized feedback is just not effective. Thank you for listening to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast. Here's a quick message from Brian O'Rourke.
Hey, Josh, thanks so much for doing this great podcast. Friends, if you're enjoying this podcast, you're really going to enjoy following at Fit Tech Council. Follow me at Brian K. O'Rourke. And you'd really, really do us a big favor if you could go on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this and give us a 5-star. If you're enjoying it, please give us a 5-star and please share this podcast. Help spread the word about technology and the great opportunities it is creating for our industry space. Thanks so much for listening.